My name is Helen Thomas, and this is the CDFM Study Group. Welcome. All right, the purpose of today's session is for us to finish up review of CDFM Module 2, Competency 2, Cost and Economic Analysis. So we kind of broke that into two sessions because it's a lot of information that's in that section. All right, there we go. Trying to navigate here. All right. Okay. And so where we're going to pick up today is on page, if you have the new book, is on page 148 because we left off on 147 with the different types of costs. So you have to remember in all three of the module, it tells you there are three DoD support systems. So once the DoD comes up with their strategy in how they're going to defend our country and our allies, and also how they're going to meet the national security strategy, then they have to have a process in place to execute. So there are three DoD support systems that is used to do that. That is JCIDS, PPBE, and the Defense Acquisition System. So as stated, once the National Defense Strategy has been completed, then the Joint Requirement Oversight Council, it's a board of people made up of the joint staff, representative from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all the services, and they do an analytical process called JCIDS, chaired by the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. And what they're doing, they're looking at MLPF, the acronym, doctrine, organization, training. They're trying to figure out, okay, this is what we want to do. What are the capabilities needed to do it? And identify if there are any capability gaps out there. Once they identify the capability gap, if it's anything other than material, it triggers the plan, program, budget execution system. However, if it's a material solution that's going to be necessary, then that solution would trigger the defense acquisition system, the third system. So if you looked at the diagram, you'll see the three circles overlap, and in the middle, they're all working together to meet the national defense strategy. And so what the Joint Requirement Oversight Council does after they complete JCIDS is they publish their recommendation or recommended solution in an initial capabilities document. And you're going to see that again in this section. And so where we are now, beginning on page 148 of the 2024, which is the most recent book as of this recording, is we're going to look at cost estimate, because when you come up with requests for weapon system, aircraft, computer system like Defense Travel System, DTS, since everybody know it, before they initiated that, they had to ask for funding. So everything has to be, we talked last session about cost as an independent variable. We got to bring everything, translate everything into money so that you can then compare if all of these courses of action do what I wanted to do and one is cheaper, I may go with the cheaper one if I can get everything that I needed. And so there are three cost estimating methods. Last session, we talked about the different types of acquisition categories. If it's an acquisition category 1, it lets you know it's a major defense program. Acquisition category 1 Delta, the D behind it lets you know it's a DoD level program. If it's a C behind it, it's a component level. 1A is automation. So like DTS is, for example, was an automated system. And the 1AM, the M stands for the MAIS, M-A-I-S, Major Automated Information System. And so it's a DoD level program. So when you look at cost estimating method, it goes in that order. It goes from the program manager, the component, and then at the DoD level. So the first cost estimate for the life cycle cost of a program is the program office estimate. Whenever you talk acquisition, the number one title of a person should come into mind is a program manager, because they basically are doing the subject matter experts, and they're doing all the analysis in that process. So a program office estimate is done in a program management office, which typically means it's done by the program manager. Then if it has, let's say it's a component level acquisition program, then at the second level, the component does a cost estimate, the CCE. And if it needs to go up to the DOD, because it's the DOD level program, then at the DOD level, the acquisition folks or the cost analysis folks, which is the DCAPE, right? Because the DCAPE came up in what? Anybody remember? The Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. Can't say that too fast. So the DCAPE came up with the programming phase of PPBE. So anything to do with cost analysis, that's your DCAPE. So the DCAPE does the independent cost estimate. That's the third level, ACAT 1 Delta, ACAT 1AM programs. They help to come up with the cost of those things. Because when they go to Congress and they're asking for funding for a program, they're not just asking for that fiscal year. They need to be able to say if the life cycle of that program is 5 years, then they need to be able to say what is the estimated cost for that 5 years. So they need different cost estimating methods, which leads us into the next section. And these are also in the older books. So this is nothing new that I'm going over. So there are various cost estimating methods. Anytime you take a cost analysis course, I guarantee you're going to see these again. So most likely you'll see these again on the exam in one form or another. Any question before I move into cost estimating methods for those that are here on the live session? Okay, I don't hear anything. We'll continue. All right, so analogy approach is the first one. Analogy sounds real old. I had a birthday yesterday, so I'm like, what? I'm that age? So analogy is saying, let's say our example, we're going to use a vehicle, or let's say an aircraft. I like aircrafts. All right, so analogy approach to coming up with how much it's going to cost to develop this new aircraft says, I have an existing similar aircraft already in the inventory. Now, when you see these cost estimating methods again, they're not going to give you the definition. Most likely, it'll be a scenario. So you're going to have to look for the keywords in that question. If it says this particular organization has to develop an aircraft and they only have one similar system in their inventory, that one word, those two words, one similar existing system, is what lets you know it's an analogy approach that they took to come up with the cost estimate. Any question on that? Because most of this, you're not going to see word for word. So analogy says, if I'm trying to get the cost estimate for building my aircraft, I already have one similar system in my inventory that I can use the cost of developing that system as my starting point. The next one is parametric approach. So metric alone lets you know, okay, there is more detailed, because parametric says I have several systems that have different components of what I want on the aircraft. So I don't have one aircraft that looks exactly like what I want to build, but I have this aircraft that has the GPS that I want, this aircraft that has the wings that I want. So I take the cost of all these individual attributes and performances, and that is how I come up with the parametric approach. And so another word for parametric is statistical, because it's very detailed, or the top-down method. So that is as deep as you need to go with these, looking for the key words. So if you read a scenario, you will say, okay, if you're taking the attributes of different similar systems, then that's parametric. Versus analogy must say I have one identical system in the inventory. The third approach is the engineering approach. Engineering is also time. It's very costly because that means it's bottom up. I'm starting from every little intricate thing that costs money. I'm going to have to determine the cost of each one of those. So engineering is called the bottom up method of cost analysis. It is very detailed. What you're looking for when you have a list such as this with all these cost estimates is you want to know, okay, what's the difference? Analogy is one, parametric is multiple system, engineering is very expensive, so most likely that will be the last resort if you don't have that any other system in your inventory. You will go to engineering. Engineering takes a lot of time. So if time is not something that you have, you may have to use a different method. That's all that is saying there. Or you have actual cost approach. That means I need to build the same exact aircraft that I already have, but I just need some more built. So actual cost approach. Less, it's a little subjectivity because you already have what you need, and the budget may already have been submitted for it. And so you just have to bargain for more. So that was analogy, parametric, engineering, and actual cost. And then you can also use expert opinion. Because let's say your boss says, hey, in 30 minutes, I need to know what's the cost estimate of developing this aircraft. Who has the time in 30 minutes? Expert opinion says, if I have various program managers, I can get the cost estimate from several program managers, and I can then look at similarities and come up with, I guess you could say, a rough estimate, because that's what you're doing with the expert opinion, is you're getting opinion from the subject matter experts, and then you're determining things that are similar in what they say, summarizing their results. So that is called the Delphi technique, DELPHI. That's also in the older books. And so, like I said, that's why I'm going through. There's nothing different there. Any question on cost estimating methods? And if I say anything, for those that are on the live session, you don't understand or you need me to repeat, please let me know. All right, so next section deals with managing acquisition programs. So again, the program manager, anything to do with acquisition, they are the primary point of contact for all things acquisition. So including developing the budget estimates for the program. And so establishing the acquisition program baseline, the APB, the baseline. And when you study, don't forget what you already learned. You got to be able to tie it back to that, because last session, I think when we talked about milestone B, we said that the milestone decision authority, along with the program manager, comes up and solidifies the acquisition program baseline. So that's what they're talking about here on the bottom of this page. Let's see, that's page 151. So the acquisition program baseline, that sets the starting point. This is how much it's going to cost based on what we know today. Cost, schedule, performance. I'm going to keep repeating that. Anytime you deal with acquisition, they're not only looking at cost, they're looking at timeline, that's schedule, they're looking at the quality, they're looking at performance. Cost, schedule, performance. So the acquisition program baseline, the starting point in the acquisition program, and as they move along and you get real data or real budget amounts, then you can update the baseline. All right, so the next section goes into budgeting for learning curve. Now, learning curve is not a cost estimating method like analogy, parametric, and so forth. However, this technique is used to help come up with the life cycle cost of a program. The idea behind the learning curve theory is that the more a person does a job, if your job is to build aircrafts, the idea is that each time you build it, it's going to take you a shorter time. It's going to cost me less because you're building it at a high quality at a shorter time span. Cost, schedule, performance. And so you develop a learning curve theory amount or learning curve percentage. And we'll go into what or how you may see it again on the exam. So the learning curve again is, let's say I build one aircraft this month. The learning curve says that next month, if I'm building the same aircraft, I should be able to complete it. If it took me a week the first time, then it should take me maybe 4 days and so forth. And then my workload should double. I should be able to perform better than I did when I first started the job. And the examples will help. So I'm going to take it down to, there are two types of learning curve and how you come up with the learning curve. Do either of you have the book with you? Because I can kind of read it kind of slow. Thumbs up or no thumbs? Hand raised, nothing? Okay. So there are two types. They're in the older book. Type 1 says you are given the hours. You are given the learning curve percentage or learning curve rate. And they will say, how much hours will it take to do the next aircraft? For example, I go with the example in the book. It says, if you are given 300 hours and the learning curve rate is 90% to create one unit, and I ask you, well, how many hours does it take to create 2 units? All you have to do is, because that's what you're going to have to do on the exam, is take 300 times 90%. And because you're not going to have a calculator, remember to convert your 90% to 0.90. So 0.90 times 300, I haven't moved, my light went out. That will be 270 hours for unit 2. And then that 270 hours, let's say I want to know if it's 300 hours to create one aircraft and the learning curve is 90%. And then it says, well, how many hours will it take to create 4 units? The workload should double. So 4 units will be 270 for unit 2 times 0.90, and it'll take 243 hours to create 4 aircraft. Ask me some questions. What are your questions? Or do I need to repeat that example? And if y'all see anybody trying to get in, please go ahead and accept them in so I can stay focused. All right. All right. So type 2 on that same page, 154, type 2 learning curve. Learning curve number 2, you may be given the hours and the unit. And they might ask you, what is the learning curve rate? That's how you will probably see it again. So let's say if given unit 2 and everything doubles, so it's unit 2, unit 4, 8, 16, and so forth. So if unit 2 takes 250 hours, what would the learning curve rate be for the following units? So unit 4, How could you calculate that? If you don't have a calculator and you taking it on the exam and all they give you is 2 units, 250 hours, how can you come up with the learning curve rate? And I'll give you an example of how I would do it. All right, I don't hear any feedback. All right, so the easiest thing I will tell you, if you're taking an exam, they're going to have four choices. Let's say they have 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%. What I'll do, I'll take unit 2, that 250 hours times 60%, 250 hours times 70%, 80%, 90%. And then I go back and look in the problem and see, do I see 237.5 hours? Nope. Nope to 60%. Nope to 70%. On 90%. So the learning curve rate for this example is 90%. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Because it's kind of hard when I'm not able to actually show you what I'm talking about. Okay. I'll be like, you'll be looking all crazy. And the reason I'm trying to say you have to think of different ways to do it, because you're not going to have no calculators. You can't go 237.5 and how divided by 250, unless you're good with math like that long. Yeah, I'm used to calculators now. Or is it 95%? So if you're actually good with division, it's really just taking, if they say unit 4 requires 237.5, it's taking the 237.5 divided by the 250 for unit 2. And actually what you will get is 95% learning curve. And all of the rates should be the same. Meaning they, in the book, they gave you unit 8 requires 200, let me test that theory because I didn't test it. 225.6 hours. Unit 4 was 237.5. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the 225.6 divided by 237.5, and I do get 95%. So for this example, the learning curve rate is 95%. So you're going to have to do calculations with cost and economic analysis, this section. So that's why I'm harping on this part of it. All right. So we know that, all right, we're going to move on to the acquisition process, dealing with contracts. You know, there are different types of contracts. Some are fixed price, some are reimbursable, and so forth. So what you need to know there is the two basic types. Fixed price, mean the government pays that price and is subject to some fixed maximum ceiling. That's the price the government is paying. Cost reimbursement, the government pays the cost, but it's subject to change based on what it costs that contractor to do that job. Cost reimbursement, you got to pay them back. Nothing significant stands out there. But what you also need to bear in mind when you're looking at a fixed price versus a reimbursable contract is who's bearing the risk. Is the government bearing the risk or is it the contractor? I would say if you're doing a firm fixed price, knowing that price always changes, if a contractor signs on a firm fixed price, well, the government has the advantage. So the greatest risk will be to the contractor. On the other side of it, if it's a cost plus, which is other categories they have, then the risk will be to the government. Cost reimbursement, because you don't know what that final cost is going to be. So just kind of look at it that way. If they ask you who bears the majority of the risk in a fixed price versus a cost reimbursement, fixed price, meaning that's what the government pays, you can't charge me nothing else, then the contractor is bearing the risk versus the other way around. All right, get ready, get ready, get ready. Earned value management. All right, if you thought I was speaking another language before, it's like, all right, so that's why module 2 I have to take in like real small chunks because they jump topics all around. All right. Earned value management is going to require you to learn formulas, and it's going to require you to do some calculation. So you need to spend some time with it, because when I took my acquisition exam last year, or during COVID, a lot of the question was on EVM and knowing those formulas. So earned value management is just the process that the contractor and the government work together, and then it's kind of evaluating the performance of the contractor as you're going along in the process. Something that a COR does, contract representative should be doing. So that relates the technical performance to the cost, schedule, and the performance of that contract. I'm grading you off of the cost. If it's a fixed price, then I don't expect you to come back and ask me for no more money. But if it's reimbursable, and let's say the cost creeps and out of your control, then you got to make decisions. So cost is an independent variable. Early on in the process is the right time to make those decisions. So let me take it down now to those, starting with, in the new book, page 159, the analysis piece. So cost variance is the result of comparing. So this is one of the formulas, and it's in the older books also. So if you have it on digits or hard, I recommend you to write all the formulas on a sheet by themselves to know the difference. The formula says actual cost variance is a result of comparing actual cost to what you budgeted for that same thing. So ACWP, actual cost of work performed. And if you see it on the exam, they may just put the acronym ACWP, BCWP, and you're like, what are they talking about? So learn the acronym and what they mean. So BCWP can be considered the earned value. So budgeted cost of work performed is your earned value. So you got one formula there, cost variance. Let's see, did they give you schedule? Schedule variance is a little bit down, further down. You have some other formulas, and let me see. Yeah, let's stick with cost. All right, so you have different tools that you can use to show the performance of a contract, such as the program evaluation and review technique, which is the PERT and the Gantt chart. So let's see what they say. So the PERT chart is basically looking at, I guess you can say, the timeline of them building that aircraft that I was talking about. In my example of, okay, the first week is we do an evaluation, then the second week and so forth is measuring exactly the timeline and what's supposed to happen. Just like when you hire somebody to come to your house to do a work and they say, okay, it's going to take me 5 days. And then you see day 5, or day 4, they don't look nowhere like they're close to being done, which means it's going to end up costing more time on the scheduling part. So a PERT chart displays the critical steps in developing that product. So it's a way how to show it versus the Gantt chart. So let's see, the Gantt chart are useful for planning and scheduling the project. It is better at displaying schedule and resources. So you need to know the difference between using a PERT versus a Gantt chart, and just leave it at that and keep moving. Any question on anything I've covered so far? So I think now we're going into the economic analysis. let me see. So I noticed, yeah. So in this section, going back to the EVM, they don't go into as much detail because my brain was switching to module 4. So let's take it back. I don't want to give you nothing extra than what you need. Talked about that. All right, let's go to page 162. And we're going to start the economic piece of it. So cost was looking at the cost estimates, who does, what level they're done, who completes them, and so forth. And now economic analysis says I got to come up with the life cycle cost of building a product, but the value of the dollar today will not be the same tomorrow and next year. Fiscal years is what we operate on. So that's what we're going to look at. And so I'm skipping most of this because it's in the book. It's stuff you can read. Some quantifiable benefits. The reason we're also looking at analyzing cost as an independent variable, we want to say, can we get any cost savings? Cost avoidance. Can we avoid making certain payments? Is it productivity improvement? You got to be able to say what type of benefit does your decision allow for? Is it quantifiable where I can put a dollar amount on it? Or is it non-quantifiable? An example could be it improves safety. Can't really put a price on it, but safety, security, adaptability, I can use it with other systems. Morale, it improves the morale of the war fighters. So those are different non-quantifiable benefits. So just kind of know some of them off of the list. All right, descriptive statistics. So this now begins the primary area in which you're going to actually have to do calculations. The first statistical one that you're going to have to deal with, or average, is the mean. What that means is when you may get a list of numbers. Let's say these are all the different PT scores, physical training scores. What is the mean? What is the average? I always advise if you have a list of numbers, first put them in numerical order before you even answer the question. Put them in numerical order. If they give you 5, 3, 1, 9, put them all from 1, work your way up to 9. Because the mean is just simply taking the average, adding them all up and dividing by total number of values, versus the median says which is the middle number. If you already put them in order, then you'll be able to see, okay, which number is in the middle. And do I have to subtract the 2 that's in the middle if you have an even number? So you'll be able to see it better. Mode means the most repeating number. If I put them in order, because you got to have the same values. So let's say 1 is repeated a couple of times, then my mode is 1. So by knowing the definition, you'll know what you need to do. So mean, median, mode, range. Range, if I put them in order in the beginning, then I can see my largest number, my smallest number. If you take the largest number minus the smallest number, that is your range, right? And then standard deviation is what it is. It's the formula, plus or minus 1, 2. I don't think I've ever had anybody who said they had to memorize the standard deviation percentages. So I wouldn't focus so much on that. Any question? So that's the economic analysis, statistical part of it. Then you have inferential. What can you infer from the data? As I always have managers who say, when you give them a number, what's the so what? So what does that mean? What can you infer from that data? So there's another formula in here. Let's see. I like going with the examples. Proportion. So consider the historical relationship of object class 11, personnel. They give an example in the top of page 172. Proportion can also be used to compare items or individual. What is the relationship between, let's say you have people who go to school, go to training. When they come back, does their productivity improve because they went to the training? You got to look at the proportion or rate. Number of items or individuals in one category divided by the number of items in all categories. So they gave an example. Let me see. Your supply department had 100 engines in inventory come January the 1st. And this is the same example in the older books. On February the 1st, the inventory was only 75. Then they might say, well, what is the percent change from January to February? You have to take 75 minus 100 divided by 100 times 100, and what you will get is 25%. The decreased change, because you went from 100 to 75, so it's a decreased change, was a negative change because it's a negative 25%. Example 2 says, now comes March the 1st, that 75 went back up to 100. By what percent change was it from February to March? 100 minus 75 divided by 75, then times 100, because it's a percentage, you get 33%. Make sure you practice these particular problems. So 2.2 is where you'll get all those formulas and so forth. So that's proportion of change, percent change. Any question on percent change? So that was inferential. Now you have measures of correlation. So you look at, okay, I think I was alluding to this one, where you can look at, does something have a positive relationship? Does those individuals who went to training and now they come back to go to work, look at their productivity level, did it increase? Yes, then that's a positive correlation. Versus examination scores that are low, then what type of errors do they have? Is there a correlation? So a negative correlation could be when the errors are high, the examination scores are high. So it means, okay, that's a negative correlation versus no correlation. So you need to look at the graphs in the book to kind of see, if you get that picture, you see those two things, age versus examination, because the values are all over the place, it lets you know that age has nothing to do with the level of the scores on the exams. So that's no correlation. All right. Any question before we switch to cost analysis fundamentals and the time value of money? All right. So you have two types of dollars when you're coming up with cost estimate. Constant dollars, it says, are the result of removing inflation. So if I'm trying to come up with the cost of developing my aircraft for 5 years, I'm not looking at inflation. Just constant, whatever the money, the cost is today, I'm going to say for the next 5 years, it's the same thing, right? Versus current year dollars, which is where you're going to have to do your economic analysis, is now you have to consider inflation when each year, you know, inflation is going to have an impact on the value of that dollar. Know the definition of sunk costs, are expenditures from prior fiscal years. Sunk cost means once I spend that money, let's say we do a study, a manpower study, and they determine at the end of that study, nope, we don't need to make any changes. Well, that cost for that study is really a sunk cost because I've already spent it and I can't recoup it, even though I did not make any changes to my manpower. So that's just an example. All right. Now we go into time value of money. Going back to the premise that the value of the dollar today will not be the same next fiscal year. So the end of the year, or if they give you mid-year discount factors, you're going to have to do calculations. Some of it may be givens, and I don't think they'll have to be too detailed where you got to do like the formula yourself, because that will be real time consuming. But the present value of the dollar times the discount. With these, I always like to go to the examples because it's easier to see. All right, so for this particular example, they have a 5-year product, 5-year life cycle, and they have mid-year discount factor versus year end. Whenever you get a problem on the exam, you have to read it, because if they give you the rate for mid-year and the rate for end of year, you need to read and see, are they asking you to calculate for the mid-year discount or the end of year? Because depending on which one you use, yeah, your answer may be one of the 4 choices, but it could still be wrong. So always read your questions correctly. So an example of the present value of discounted cost. So this example says I have years from the proposed investment. I bought my aircraft on year 0, then it has 5 years life cycle. Year 1, the expected yearly cost was $10. So I discounted 4% because it's year end that we're using, so 0.96. And so my present value of the cost is $9.62. I'm just keeping it small. And so that $10 is now $9.62. Any question? I don't want to go too deep into it because it's kind of hard when you're dealing with math and just sitting there listening to it. But just remember, whatever the values, you'll have the discount rates. If it says for year 1, you're discounted by 96%. For year 2, by 92%. Year 3, 89%. So if you have a product that you're developing and you have the years, then make sure you just take whatever you have to pay and then discount it by that percentage and then add everything up. And that would tell you, like for this example, the expected yearly value from constant dollars is $100. But if I discount it, that $100 is only worth $88.64 based on the example given. So I'm not going to go into more detail than that. Then you have the break-even point. When you make a purchase, you want to know, okay, well, how long is it going to take for me to pay off this? And now I'm able to start saving, funding. If you make an investment, let's say, I'll read the example given, you bought a new system that has a $1 million investment cost, annual operating cost of $50,000. Then you also have a proposed system to replace it that's only cost $300,000. So therefore, you would have saved $250,000 per year in operating costs. That's operating costs only. So how many years will it take for the savings in operating costs to equal the investment cost? And if you take that million and you divide it by that 250,000, I'm waving my light, keep popping off here. That is 4 years. So it'll take 4 years to break even and get your funding back. All right, any question on breaking even? Let me see. So I think that should be most of what you need. Yep. So that is the cost analysis. Even though the session is kind of short today, is there's a lot of calculation and it doesn't relay well when I'm just doing a video. And so I always tell people to go back in those areas, get your separate sheet of paper and write those formulas out to make sure that you understand what they're talking about. So that's the end of the cost and the economic analysis section. Next session, we're going to do the strategic planning and organizational performance management next session. All right, I can stand by for any questions. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube page, please, sir, please, ma'am, please subscribe. Just click that button. There's a notification bell at the very top. If you click on it, it'll notify you when I upload like today's session video, and you'll know whenever I upload any new videos. Click like on a video if you're watching it. He's like, oh, that makes plenty sense, Miss Helen. Click like for me because I need more activity on those videos so that YouTube will keep pushing it as people type in Google and they type CDFM study, CDFM help, those videos will pop up to help individuals study in this process. All right, any last minute questions for those here on the live sessions? We can go ahead and answer those for the benefit of the group and the video, or you could stand by when I sign off. Any questions? No?
Oh, thank you.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group. See you guys again next time. All right. Y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.